That morning was really surreal. Like I said, we spent 3 years getting ready for this. You're so prepared, you're so ready to go, but still, as you row out of the marina and there's a big sign that says 3,000 miles to go, it's really intimidating and it's a bit scary to finally be out there and that's it. That's just you and the conditions, and you need to make it happen.
Hello, intrepid listeners, and welcome to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. I'm your host, Dale Simonson, and this episode is an incredible story of four women rowing a boat nonstop for 38 days across the Atlantic Ocean. They are four marine biologists calling themselves Salty Science, and once they left the safe harbor in the Canary Islands off the African coast, it was just their teamwork, grit, and 3,000 miles of open water until they arrived in the Caribbean. There's so many interesting aspects to this adventure, but it's the description of the boat, the little tiny rowboat that served as home for more than 5 weeks, that most amazes me. Listen and decide for yourself the most amazing part. Enjoy the show, and follow me on Instagram with my handle @GoCarpeDiemNow for some cool photos of my guests' adventures. Chantal Bijin, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm really excited to talk to you about your rowboat trip across the Atlantic Ocean. What a big adventure that must have been.
Yeah, it was a serious adventure. The adventure itself, which was 5.5 weeks, but also all of the preparation, which was almost 3 years.
3 years in the making. Wow.
Yeah.
And this was, correct me if I'm wrong, this was part of what they call the world's toughest row Atlantic event. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the World's Toughest Row is a yearly race. There's actually two versions of it. There's the Atlantic race and the Pacific race. So we took part in the Atlantic race, which is from the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa all the way to Antigua in the Eastern Caribbean. So that's a distance of 3,000 miles on your rowboat, unsupported. There were 38 boats that year. Those were boats of various sizes and team sizes. There was one 5-person team. There were 13 4-person teams. There were people doing it as trios, duos, and solos. And out of the 4-person teams, 5 of them were for women's teams. So that included us, the four of us, the Team Salty Science.
And you won. You won your category.
We won the women's category. That's true. That was really the cherry on top of the sundae. Winning wasn't our ultimate goal, our number one goal when we set out to do this race. We thought about it as a team, decided on what our most important goals were, and being safe.
Survive.
Yeah,
Survive,
exactly.
probably ranked high.
And making it across was very important for us. So making it across safely was number one. Doing it in the most fun way we could was also very important. Doing it in a way that we were proud of ourselves, of our how we behaved, how we treated each other, and staying friends throughout was really important. That was number two. And number three, once we had achieved number one, safety, number two, the best fun possible, was to row as fast as possible. And it turns out that staying true to those three things, we ended up being the fastest women, which was really amazing.
And you actually kind of had a fourth goal there too, did you not? Team Salty Science, which I love the name, very appropriate. You were doing this for a bit of a cause.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, we're Salty Science. We chose that name because we're four marine biologists and we all work in ecology and conservation. And through this row, we raised money for marine conservation for three different nonprofits.
No, that's fantastic. So I want you to tell us a little bit about that Team Salty Science, but first, tell our audience a little bit about who you are.
Sure. I grew up in Quebec, Canada. I'm French Canadian and didn't grow up near the ocean, but through a series of interesting life things, I ended up studying marine biology in college and tended to say yes to all kinds of opportunities. And that eventually took me to the Caribbean, where I started working on a school ship. And I spent over 5 years teaching marine biology and oceanography on that school ship that was initially based in the Caribbean and eventually sailed on a different one that sailed around the world. And that's where I met my husband, who was also working on that school ship. We now live in the Tampa Bay area with our two daughters who are 10 and 15. And overall, I just kind of like adventures and I like to jump on opportunities and try new things and learn new things.
Wow, and you have spent a lot of time at sea, so that part of it was not new to you.
That's right. And that was
Yeah.
actually one of the big advantages that we had as a team. We had a lot of seagoing experience.
I wish we could have had some of your other teammates on this session as well. I think a couple of them are at sea now as we speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, Noel and Lauren are both on research expeditions in the South Pacific, different expeditions, different projects, but they're floating around the same general area of the ocean. And Isabel texted this morning that she was heading up for some field work on the Indian Arm near Vancouver. So she's on a boat right now, and she was asking me if she could join at the last minute. And then I brought up that she needed fairly quiet conditions and headphones. And then I didn't hear from her. She said she might not actually have a signal. So there you go. Three of the salty
Yeah.
scientists are on boats doing various things and couldn't be
You
here.
must feel a little left out right now.
It's all right. I spend my fair share amount of time on and near the water.
Well, I'll tell you, Chantal, I sailed that route you rode. I sailed that route a year before you rode it. So I have a very good picture in my mind of what you saw, but I don't have anything close to the experience that you had because I was in a big, comfy sailboat. So tell us about the adventure once you left the Canary Islands, that day you pushed off.
Yeah, that morning was really surreal. Like I said, we spent 3 years getting ready for this. You're so prepared, you're so ready to go, but still, as you row out of the marina and there's a big sign that says 3,000 miles to go, it's really intimidating and it's a bit scary to finally be out there and that's it. That's just you and the conditions, and you need to make it happen. And it's stressful. You're going to be at sea for a long time by yourself, just you and what you have with you. And the weather got big really quick. So within a day, we were in very big seas. And I've done a lot of sailing in tropical latitude, trade wind sailing, and the kind of seas we saw were not what you expect at those latitudes we expected. And we ended up being in very big waves. We think probably about 30 feet high, but also
Mm.
very steep. The waves were very, very close together, and it was very scary very quickly. And especially in the first few days before we got to know our boat, because we had rowed our boat coastally, and the most we had done, the furthest offshore we had been, I think, was about 45 nautical miles off the coast of Tampa Bay in the Gulf in training. And so we hadn't experienced very big seas in our boat. And we learned to trust her very quickly because we took some massive waves and we actually never capsized. A lot of teams that year capsized. We never did. But the boat was swamped multiple times and the water drained out and we'd, reset the autopilot and keep going. So that was a real challenge that we had. If we go to the big picture race, it took us 30 days, 18 hours, and 56 minutes. So about 5.5 weeks. And that was actually,
30 days with four of you on a very small boat.
yeah,
Wow.
38 days. Yes.
38 days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
38 days.
Wow.
But that was actually faster than what we expected because the conditions were so big. The wind was super strong early on. Then at some point we had headwinds about a third of the way in. But overall, the conditions were fast and scary, but fast. And so we expected to take at least 40 or 42 days. We had enough supplies to last 55 days at sea. And in the end, it only took us 38 days.
I'm trying to picture. So I actually rowed a boat down the length of the Mississippi River, and
Mhm.
it was just a big fat open wooden rowboat. And I remember there's a few Lake Pepin and some other places behind dams that are slack water, big open expanses, and I would get wind days where I couldn't row, and even waves a foot or two high would make it almost impossible because it would just catch the blades of the or how would you row in 10, 20, 30-foot seas?
Yeah. So we rode the entire time. We never stopped. We never had to set our para anchor. And so we managed to essentially row the entire time. But it's important to know that we went from La Gomera to Antigua, so from east to west at those latitudes. You're dealing with northeast trade winds.
Yeah. So there's
And so the
favorable winds
correct.
pushing you.
Correct. So we
Yeah.
went with the winds and with the currents. It would be just about impossible to go in the other direction. And
Yeah.
one of our, I mean, I already talked about the challenge of the first week or so, which was massive waves and very strong wind, but that was pushing us in the right direction. So in that first week, at some point, I think we had a day of 96 nautical miles, which is very fast. I think that was our fastest day. About 10 days or 2 weeks in, we ended up catching the southern end of a low pressure system, and we had slightly unfavorable winds. And that was very difficult in a very different kind of way. Now we had headwinds, and it was pretty flat. The headwinds weren't strong, but still to row against that was really, really challenging. Some teams, that other teams got stuck in the same system. Some of them ended up putting the para anchor out, which is essentially just a underwater parachute that you can release from your bow to prevent you from drifting backwards too much.
Just
If you
slow your backward drift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can't row against the conditions, you just put that out, slow the backward drift, and just go rest. And we found that we were always able to make some progress in the right direction. And we agreed as a team that as long as we're making some progress in the right direction, we would keep rowing. And I think our worst day was 23 nautical miles. So that means that we're going on average less than 1 knot, which is really hard to look at the instruments and know that you're going so slowly for how much effort you're putting in. So,
Hmm.
different stages were challenging in different ways.
Did you have any calm?
Yeah. The calmest that we had was when we got near or were about to exit that low pressure system where we didn't quite have headwinds and it was just calm. And that is actually really difficult to row in because the boat is really large. So this is so far from a river rowing boat. The boat is not sleek. She's not that hydrodynamic compared to those very narrow boats. She's very heavy. And so it's really hard to row her in flat, calm weather. So the best weather is when you have 10, 15-foot seas, 10, 15 knots of wind, roughly pushing you in the right direction because the boat does have a fair amount of windage. And for those
Hmm.
who know about rowing, Olympic rowers on rivers, they feather their blades. So they turn their
Yeah.
blades where they're horizontal when in the recovery stroke so that there's not wind catching against them. We never do that in ocean rowing. First off, you would end up with overuse injury doing that much twisting with the
Hmm.
oars 12 hours a day. But also, for the most part, the wind is going with you. So really that wind is just, pushing against your oars is a positive.
I'm guessing the event has rules that you cannot put up a sail.
Absolutely. So you are to be on your own power the entire time. So you can't be helping yourself with sales of any kind. And there was a team a few years ago that, in a particularly bad day, sort of as the joke, just grabbed a bed sheet and held it up for an hour or so, and then are being disqualified for that as having an unfair advantage for that quote unquote sale. So you don't want to do anything that could be construed as trying to give yourself an advantage sailing. And you also can't take help from any, at least not any physical help. So, say a super yacht comes by or a cruising boat that is just going across the Atlantic and they come and cheer you on and they're like, hey, we'd like to toss you a brew or some fresh baked bread that we just made. You're not allowed to take any of that help. That would disqualify you.
It would be so tempting, although I don't know about you guys. We saw literally just one boat the entire crossing, and it was an ocean racer that, went by us at triple our speed. I don't, did you encounter any other craft?
Yeah, we didn't see a lot. We saw a few tankers or container ships, so a few big vessels leaving the Canary Islands, and very little in the very middle, though we actually were able to see on AIS
Hmm.
some of our competitors so that was the craziest thing in the middle of the slowest conditions. There were 4 or 5 of us that were quite close to one another, and the nearest boat were the other team of 4 women that we played leapfrog with, all crossing. And
Oh,
we were about 1,000 miles from the Canary Islands, and we were about, I think, 1 nautical mile apart from one another. So we saw their
oh,
lights
that's
at night
amazing.
one time, and they hailed us on the VHF, and we ended up chatting with them for a little bit. So it was really crazy that far out we were still that close to one another.
Yeah, what are the odds? Because that was one of my biggest takeaways, I guess, surprises, is just how vast that ocean is. And when we did the east to west crossing, like your route, it was with a rally of 70 boats, 70 boats. And we all departed the Canaries at the same time. After 12 hours, visually couldn't see any. After 24, nobody appeared on the radar or AIS. It's like, where'd they all go? But you're all in the same ocean. It's just the separation happens so fast.
Yeah, and it really is a big ocean.
It is really big.
Yeah.
So you have 38 days of nothing but water to the horizon. Explain a little bit your rowing schedule, the sleep schedule, how you dealt with meals, nutrition, what were you eating? Just explain some of what you had on board.
Sure. So for context here, let me talk about the boat a little bit because that's always really fascinating to people. Our boat is a boat that was designed specifically for ocean rowing. Her name was Emma. She was 28 feet long, 5.5 feet wide or so. We bought her used, so she had already done three Atlantic crossings. Fiberglass boat designed to self-right if she capsizes. The rowing deck has three rowing seats, so moving seats like you see in the rowing shells in the Olympics. We had four sets of oars so that we could afford to lose two oars or break two oars and still be good for three rowers. There's a rudder. We had two very small cabins, one at the bow, one at the stern, and those cabins are watertight. So there's a hatch, and you always keep that hatch closed. As long as those hatches are closed, she should self-right if she capsizes.
Define small for those cabins. It's got to be really small.
Yes, it's very small. So the bow cabin ends in a very pointy bit, of course, because the bow has to be quite narrow. So the bow cabin was kind of triangular. Isabel and Noel shared that cabin. They could each lay completely straight in that cabin. So from the rowing deck, they would open the hatch and put their feet directly on the mattress, basically where their feet would go. The
Uh-huh.
stern cabin was even smaller. So that one, we would open the hatch, put our feet on our mattress, and that was about where our waist would be. We would put our head towards the stern, towards the rudder compartment, and then from our hips down, so all our legs were in this extremely small coffin-like bit that went under the rowing deck. So your teammate that is rowing is in fact really sitting on top of your legs. So
I
those
get it.
cabins are really small, and we had to carry so much gear in them. You expect only one person will be in the cabins at a time because we always had two people rowing at a time. So we set it
Hmm.
up where Lauren and I shared a cabin, therefore we never rowed together. So when she'd be done rowing, she'd come in the cabin and I'd go row. The stern cabin also has all of the electronics, so all of the navigation system. You can hear the rudder and the autopilot moving constantly. You can hear the VHF from there. So yeah, as we said, there's a rudder. You move the rudder manually or with an autopilot. We had watertight compartments under the rowing deck where we stored a lot of safety gear, as well as all our food. The batteries were there. We had the water maker. We had a 12-volt water maker, so reverse osmosis. We took salt water and made fresh water out of that. We had two solar panels on top of the cabins that we could
So
capture.
was that water maker solar driven?
Yeah, well, it's powered by the batteries, which themselves are powered by the solar panels. So, yep,
Yeah.
we had that water maker, but we also had a manual backup water maker so that if the 12-volt water maker went, we still had something because, of course, you can't survive very long without water, so that would be a huge problem. We
Yeah.
had all of the navigation equipment that you might expect, an autopilot. We had three satellite phones, two VHF radios. We had a GPS, a backup GPS, a life raft, medical kit that was pretty extensive, some basic tools for repairs and spare parts for all kinds of different things on the boat, and all of the food that we needed for the entire crossing because, of course, it's unsupported. So we had to bring all of our food.
Wow. And so the galley and the shower was where? I'm kidding.
Great question. There was no galley, there was no shower,
No.
and there was no head. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Shower time was really just with a cloth. Every time we'd get off the oars, we would, try to clean ourselves. Staying clean is really important. About once a week, we would stop quickly to jump in, scrape the hull, scrape any barnacles and growth that were on the hull, and
Uh-huh.
that typically would double up with shower time. There's no galley, so we had a little stove, a little camping stove, a Jed boil. So we just boiled water on deck. So I basically just rested that between my feet and tried really hard not to dump boiling water on myself. And
Wow.
the head was just a bucket on deck, so no privacy on board,
Yeah.
Emma.
Yeah. Yeah. You do what you got to do.
Yep.
You get to know your teammates.
Yep. No, get to know your teammates very, very well. And,
Yeah.
that's part of the big difference between, well, it's the fact that you have to row and you can't sail. But if you look at, sailing across the Atlantic versus rowing, the boat is so small that you just can't carry a lot of stuff. So even just clothes, we made our packing list together so that it was all fair. We all had the same amount of stuff. And I think we all allowed ourselves four t-shirts and I think two pairs of shorts. And, it was very little clothing and you just wore the same stuff over and over and didn't do a whole lot of laundry. But for day to day, so you asked about eating schedule and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So day to day life, we rode around the clock. So we always rode in teams of two. We had our daytime schedule and our nighttime schedule, and we each rode 12 hours a day. So during the day, we rode 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., we rode 3 hours on and 3 hours off. And so
Okay.
because I shared a cabin with Lauren, I only rode with Noel and Isabel, and we set it up where we offset the shifts. So one of the really great things I think that we did is that we had it where I would start rowing and I would row with Noel for an hour, and then she would get off, and then Isabel would come on for an hour. So that was a really nice way to break
Yeah.
up your shifts, where you'd talk to two different people, you'd follow two different podcasts or whatever. But yeah, so you have 12 hours of rowing, 12 hours off. And so outside of your rowing and your off time, you have to eat, you have to clean yourself up, you have to try to rest. So you have to take care of everything your body needs. And then you also have to take care of what the team and the boat need. So we need to make water, we need to clean the boat, we need to make repairs as they arise. So that off
Oh, and
time doesn't mean
navigation, weather checks, and yeah.
all of that, exactly. So that 12 hours off doesn't mean that you get to sleep for 12 hours. So we probably, on average, slept about 5 hours a night. So we mostly slept at night, and that was in those, we had 3 hours off at night. So if you were fast and you were able to, brush your teeth, clean yourself up, and go to bed within 15 minutes, imagine that you can fall asleep immediately, which might not happen. Then you have 2.5 hours before your alarm goes off for your next shift. So
Yeah.
if you have two very successful sleeps, then that's 5 hours. And here and there
Yeah.
we'd catch up during the day, but we all found those to be quite difficult. It's a shorter time. We ate more during the day. We made more of the repairs during the day, and it was hot. Very quickly, the
I was
heat
going to say it
became.
must get quite hot in the cabins.
Yeah, and it was tough because on deck, it's extremely hot because of the sun, but in the cabins, it's extremely hot because you're just baking in this cabin with a closed hatch. And so sometimes yeah, you just kind of had to pick your poison. You had to get out of the sun some of the time. We had little fans. There's a few times where we didn't have enough power to keep the fans powered. So we chose to keep the electronics going and the autopilot going oftentimes over the fans. And so then you're just kind of baking and sweating. But
Yeah.
you learn to just kind of deal with it. And at some point, you're tired enough that you just fall asleep through that.
I'm just picturing when I crossed the Atlantic both directions, but we always had crew of five and we would only need one on for a night watch at any one time. And so, you would do a 2 or 3 hour watch that might interrupt your night's sleep. But that was it. It was one watch. I can't imagine, it's like you're double handing basically, where you're chopped up so much. It really makes it tough for
Yeah.
rest and recovery, sleep.
Yeah, very chopped up. And early on, there were also times where we just would have a massive wave in the middle of the night where, very quickly it's all hands on deck. We need help. We need help. So then you just
Yeah.
put your harness on and run on deck. And so the aft cabin often would wake up to problems with the autopilot. And so then you just know you have to get up and sort it out. And so Yeah, sometimes you don't even have that time. But that's part of the challenge. Sleep deprivation is something we're prepared for. It doesn't make it that much easier. And one of the things that we made sure of is that we double checked each other's decisions and work.
Well, the brain gets fuzzy with that kind of fatigue.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was one reason why, we had talked about it as a team, and it was important to us to say, okay, it's always okay if I say, hey, I think we need to change course for this direction. It's always okay for somebody to go like, no, I think you're off on that. Or
Yeah.
here and there, you'd forget your harness, and somebody would be like, hey, harness on, clip in. We made a conscious effort not to get upset if somebody was correcting our mistake because we all had very foggy brains.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good protocol. What were your provisions like?
Yeah, so the food, so Noah was the brain behind the food, and she did an amazing job at that. She overplanned this when we were back on shore, which means that we didn't have to think about it much at all while offshore. So our food was an aim of about 4,000 calories per person per day, or maybe 45, I forget. It was based on our weight, so it varied a little bit person to person. That's a lot of calories. It's very difficult to eat that much. It was typically three proper meals, so freeze dried or dehydrated expedition type meals, the kinds that you would take in the backcountry, where you just open the packet, pour boiling water on top, wait 10 minutes, and enjoy your meal.
Uh-huh.
And on top of that, every one of us had a gallon-sized bag of snacks every day, which was so while the meals were nutritious, the snacks were anything from Cheez-Its to chocolate to whatever, nuts and fruit and nuts and dried fruit, applesauce, Rice Krispie
Calories.
treats, whatever calories, exactly, whatever calories would just bring more calories in your body. All of us fell short of our calorie goals. It was very difficult to eat that much, not just because you're tired and you're so busy. It's hard to want to eat that much and you're hot, but also
Yeah.
oftentimes it just came down to, do I want to spend 15 minutes eating right now, or do I want to have 15 more minutes to sleep? And sometimes it's just
Yeah.
like sleep.
Yeah. Did you do a weigh-in when you left Canaries and when you arrived in Antigua?
We sure did. That's a thing that the World Stuff Festival does every time, and
Okay.
each of us lost at least 14 pounds, so 14 to 18
Oh,
pounds each in 5.5
wow.
weeks, while while really trying to eat a lot.
So for any of our listeners out there who are looking to lose weight quickly in a month, if you want to row across the Atlantic, you could lose a good 10, 15 pounds.
Right. And then you have to ask yourself if you want the whole Atlantic crossing in a rowboat thing to go with that.
There's easier ways to lose weight, probably.
Right.
So tell us your highest highlight and one of your worst.
Let's start with the worst. So, I mean, there were the scary moments. Those are tough. Like I said, the start of the race was super intense, just the waves that are so steep that we weren't quite expecting that. And so within a few days, we broke a rigger plate, where your oar lock is, that the plate that keeps that about 6 inches out from the gunnels. So the pivot point from where your oar is. We, in a bad wave pinned two of our oars under the boat and bent that 1/4 inch metal, which means that
Hmm.
our middle station on night 3 or 4 became completely unusable. The next night, we broke an oar in a similar very bad wave. I think a
Hmm.
day later, we flooded our water maker compartment, so our 12-volt water maker quit working, which is
Oh.
a huge bummer because at that point you're either fixing it, though we weren't in weather conditions to fix it at that point. If you can't fix it, that means that you're hand pumping about 45 minutes to an hour each a day to make enough water. So the
Yeah, those
first,
manual water makers are hardly easy to use.
no,
It's a
right.
lot of work.
So in your, rest time, now you're using your arms to pump water and you need that for survival. So that's of course what you're going to do. But that was a tough one, just like right at the beginning when we were expecting difficult conditions. At some point, we're expecting things to break. We were expecting all kinds of challenges, but they were happening just on top of one another, and we were breaking things at a pace that just was not sustainable. And we're like, if this keeps at this pace, we're not going to make it intact to Antigua. So that was really scary. And then it turns out things calmed
Yeah.
down, and then we had the unfavorable conditions, but the last third or so was exactly what you want, just like gentle wind and following seas. So that initial part was really hard. We had at some point some big problems with our autopilot, and we thought, it always seemed like we were just a step away from the autopilot is completely failing, which means that now in your 12 hours off, you're going to spend some of that time hand steering for the other group of rowers, or that you
Hmm.
need to row with by attaching the steering cable to one of your foot and moving your foot left and right, but basically moving your toes, pivoting your toes. And this is extremely difficult to do, especially at night when you don't have a good visual reference, especially because the light on our compass burnt out after a few days and we didn't have a
Oh,
replacement. So we didn't have a compass to look at. So that was really stressful types of things that happened. And I think maybe the final night offshore, we had a big shark ram our rudder repeatedly. It made the autopilot jump off. And I was there with epoxy putty ready to, fix cracks that would arise in the hull. There's stories, and there's not just stories. In our year, in our fleet, there's at least one team, maybe two, that had a marlin, a blue marlin, strike their boat and put a big hole in it.
oh,
And so
wow.
large fish damaging your boat are really,
Interesting.
yeah,
I know the orcas, off of Gibraltar, Portugal, have become a huge problem in the last
yeah,
couple few years.
yeah,
I never heard of the sharks and marlins attacking boats.
yep. That's happened a lot for rowboats. Most likely just because they're after little fish that are under your boat, but the result is the same, right?
Oh,
And some of the discomforts, like you're on your bum sliding back and forth for 12 hours a day. So some of us got bad rashes on our bums, and our
yeah.
mattresses within a few days were salty and wet. And so, living just sleeping on that is tough. But that's part of the adventure. We asked for an adventure, and we really did have an adventure. And those are some of the harder parts that we had. And some of the highs, well, for me, some of the biggest highs were every time we had one of those lows where the water maker breaks and it's stressful because you're just a weekend, so you're facing possibly just hand pumping water for the rest of the crossing. But Lauren took it upon herself to fix it. It took her 4 or 5 days of rebuilding the whole electrical components in our cabin, and we worked as a team. We gave her some rowing shifts off for her to have extra time to do that, and then she fixed it and she plugged it in and it worked. And so the high of
What
making it through
joy.
that, yeah, is amazing.
Isn't it
uh,
incredible? Like when you're living life like that, where it's just so raw and everything boils down to just such fundamental basics like water, like sleep, and how joyous just, oh, we have water. It's a high that you just don't get in day to day. It's not like the highs that we get when our favorite show comes on TV or you purchase something new at the store. It's a really, yeah, I
yeah.
get the point.
Yeah, absolutely. So every one of those challenges, I think, is often paired with a high. So that is really rewarding, and just the nature. We didn't see dolphins and whales every day, and you can't do this sort of thing just for that reward. But one time we had this insanely large pod of dolphins. It might have been 100 dolphins come by the boat. They were jumping up like it was SeaWorld. We stopped. My three teammates jumped in the water to go swimming with them. I stayed on board because we always had to have one person stay on board. So I just enjoyed the show, the SeaWorld show jumping from above while they're in there with a bunch of dolphins, swimming down to the point where they couldn't see them and then swimming back up and hearing them the whole time. And so those sorts of things are amazing. But also you have to be able to take the small victories and the small highs that aren't a massive pot of dolphins. And for me, the sunrises every day were just, and not all of
Uh,
them were beautiful. There's the overcast ones that are not a whole lot of anything. But for me, nighttime was hard. It's dark. Big waves happen. You can't see them. It's hard to stay awake for your 3 hours of rowing. And, going into each night, though, there's a nice sunset often. It just kind of felt like getting ready for battle. And then you're so tired and you can hardly make it, but then you start seeing the sunrise. And because we're rowing towards the west, but because rowing, you're sitting backwards. So we're always looking in the stern that's facing east. We got to really see the sunrises. So
Yeah.
that was really a high for me every day.
Wow. I'm glad you mentioned some neat highs because most of this conversation has been just how much of a grind and how miserable it can be. And yet, I'm going to guess you have zero regrets. So, how did all of those tough times play out for you and your teammates in the end, Chantal? Like, how are you different because of that? How are you better? What did you gain from that that you would either do it again or recommend it to someone else?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that's one of those questions that you kind of need to reflect a little bit, where I think my answer might be a little bit different now than it was right maybe during or right after it. But, we asked for a challenge. We went for a really difficult challenge. That was part of it. And it's really rewarding to rise up to the challenge. And we rose up to the challenge in a really, really good way. And the wind being up, being first women was amazing. So that was definitely just like an extra high at the end. But I did it for myself in lots of ways. This is a really selfish thing to do. It was just me, and I left my family behind. My girls, when I set out, were 8 and 13. So they're at an age where at least, they still need their parents a lot. And left my husband, was amazing and held up the fort at home. But it was also really amazing to model completing very successfully a challenge like that for my girls. So that was a really positive aspect of it. And we also had really amazing support from our friends, from our family. One thing that this challenge taught me is just the importance of community. I have a really amazing neighborhood when I set out to do this thing, which again was almost 3 years of preparation. And during that time, Salty Science headquarters was basically my house. And so many of my neighbors stepped up and helped by donating their time, by donating money. And that was just really, really cool.
Yeah. Chantal, the purpose of this podcast is to try to encourage, inspire people to go out and do some kind of challenge, seek some adventure, change up the sameness of their daily life, and do something different. And you just said you were all seeking a challenge. Why is that? And what advice or inspiration would you give our listeners to try something? Maybe it's not the world's toughest row, but to go out and try some challenge, stretch themselves.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And there's a lot of great life lessons that you can have by challenging yourself, by trying something new and difficult. You can really learn a lot from those sorts of adventures. I definitely took away several lessons from that. Looking at this row, it was a really good reminder that you can only control the elements that you can control. You can control how you prepare for something, how you decide to tackle the night in terms of watch shifts or whatever. You can't control the weather. You can't control when things are going to break. So you control the elements you can, and you just have to stay calm through the rest. Keep a head on your shoulder and just go, okay, A, B, and C just happened. Now I need to do this to make sure we don't get to D, E, and F, which would be really problematic. It was a great reminder that attitude is everything. When I used to work on the school ship with my husband, we used to tell our students that the difference between an ordeal and an adventure is your attitude. And it's so true. Adventures have an element of challenge and difficulty. There's probably a time in a big adventure where you wish you weren't there. But if you can just keep a good attitude throughout and have a good time, keep a smile on your face, it makes all the difference. And to be kind and be nice and have a good time with my teammates was really, really important part of that challenge for me.
Yeah.
One element that was really unique to me in this challenge was the team aspect. So you're in that small boat with three other people, right? You might not always agree, and sometimes in life or death kind of situations. And so that can bring a lot of conflict. There's a lot of teams that finish these sorts of challenges and don't talk to each other again the minute they reach the dock. And we talked a
Wow.
lot about how to work as a team. And of course, an important element here is that when you tackle massive, massive challenges like this, it can be so overwhelming that you have to just go one small part at a time. You can't set out from La Gomera and set the waypoint on Antigua and go, okay, we rode 1 mile. There's 2,999 miles to go, because that just feels impossible. And so if you go, okay, I'm super seasick, I just can't, okay, I just need to do 2 hours. In 2 hours, I can go below and sleep. Can I do this? Okay, yes. Then the next 4 hour bit is going to be a different time. So that I think is really important thing that applies to these big challenges, but also a lot of things in life.
That is a common theme that I hear from some of my guests that have done these long endurance things. So, Chantal, the cause, so marine conservation, you're all marine biologists. You all have a really neat website, saltyscience.org. And it talks about the cause, talks about the crew, the four of you, the race. There's some really cool pictures. I look at the pictures of the boat, Chantal, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did you spend 38 days on that? You described that aft cabin. It doesn't look like a cabin.
Yeah,
It looks like a
small.
shoebox. That's just amazing. There's a donate page on that. Are you still seeking donations?
That's a great question. So we raised $150,000 that we split equally between our three nonprofits.
Bravo.
And we're just writing checks and closing that out now. So please check out the three nonprofits. And if you're moved to donate to one of them, that's great. And if you don't have the money to donate anything at this point, that's okay as well. Stay informed and ask the people running for office how they support our environment. And you can use that to help inform how you vote.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. And that leads me to my last question. And maybe it's a two-part question. What is your next big adventure or dream that you have? And is there one for Salty Science?
Great question. So, as it stands, Salty Science was the Atlantic Adventure. But I expect we'll keep working together and doing things together in different ways. And for me, I also don't have any specific adventures or challenges coming up. A lot of people have asked me, okay, you've done this crazy thing. Now what's next? What's next, I think, is to learn to slow down and chill out a little bit more. I'm very type A. And I jumped into this head first, went full on for 3 years preparing for this row, doing this row. And, my girls are now 10 and 15, and we've done cool adventures as a family. Yeah, yeah, I want to enjoy time with them while they're still with us. The big adventure I
Yeah.
did before the Atlantic Row was we took 8 months off and we sailed our little 40-foot sailboat from Florida to the Grenadines and back and did some
Oh,
research projects along the way. And that was a real challenge because sailing with a 7 and 2-year-old is not easy.
oh, that's
But
fantastic.
but that was still something that they talk about. I don't know what it's going to be, but for now, it's enjoy the time that I have with my kids, do some other family adventures, the four of us, while we're at ages where that works out.
Wow. Well, I wish you the best. I really appreciated this conversation. Like I said, I could have talked for 3 hours on this topic or more, but thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. It was a lovely chat.
All right. You have a good day.
You as well.
Thanks for listening to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. If you like the show, there's nothing more valuable to me than you following it and sharing it with others. I drop a new episode every Friday, so tune in again for another great adventure story. And check out the accompanying website, www.gocarpediemnow.com, and then go seize the day and live your dream.